So today's lesson is Don't Drink and Dragon. Hello my friends of Ice and Fire. Today we are back again with Season 2 Episode 5 of House of the Dragon. Coming off the heels of the last episode, the Dance of the Dragons has truly gotten underway, and now we deal with the aftermath of it all. As usual, we'll be doing a deep dive into the episode with my thoughts, opinions, and speculations, as well as some things that may or may not have been deviated from the books. There will be no spoilers for future episodes, so have no fear. If you like what I have to say, feel free to drop a like, subscribe to join the Imperial Court, and let's get into the video. The episode opens on Driftmark with Lord Corlys Velaryon as he ascends the steps to the Driftwood Throne, the ancient seat of House Velaryon. Corlys is clearly dealing with the aftermath of Rook's Rest and the death of his wife Rhaenys, the queen who never was. Their last conversation was an argument about his bastard son, Alan of Hull, before she left for war. He says later on in the episode that his house is a tomb, haunted. Corlys has lost his daughter Laena, his son Laenor, his brother Vaemond was killed by Daemon, and now his wife has been claimed by the war. Driftmark was a place of pride for Corlys. This is the home of his Hall of Nine, the place that holds all of his trophies, symbols of each of his great adventures and conquests. But with the death of his family, his home feels hollow. It was arguably his ambition that led them here. Corlys always sought to get closer to the royal family, wanting his wife to be queen, pushing his kids towards the royals and having them married to them, accepting a bastard as his heir to secure his own legacy in history. It seems that as he got closer to the Targaryen family, the people around him suffered the most. Even though Rook's Rest was entirely Rhaenys' choice, I wouldn't be surprised if he blames himself for what happened. In the books, he does blame Rhaenyra though. He even says at one point that it should have been her that died instead of Rhaenys. But we don't really see that anger this episode. We see glimpses of it, but not to the degree that we got it in the books. In King's Landing, Criston Cole shows off the severed head of the dragon Meleys. He calls her the traitor dragon and claims that Aegon was the one who killed her, which we know isn't true. This is all propaganda to make Aegon seem like a powerful king, which is even more necessary now that he's been injured so severely. They need the illusion of strength, which is why they hide his body lest the people begin to panic. But even with this declaration of victory, the people don't seem too happy about the death of Meleys. And you'd think they would be a little happy since in the last season, Meleys just busted out of the dragon pit and killed hundreds of common folk for no reason. Guess they kind of forgot about that.
Well, Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
They see the death of Meleys as an ill omen, that Rhaenyra will want an answer for this. They don't see it as a victory, but as the threat of war getting closer to their home. A man says during the progress that he thought dragons were gods, which adds a layer to why the people feel so much fear. If dragons are seen as gods, what happens when a god dies? Or more importantly, when gods start killing each other? What does that mean for the mortals below? In Season 1, Rhaenyra says that the people see Targaryens as closer to gods than men, but without their dragons, they're just like everyone else. Hugh Hammer says that Meleys is just meat. There's nothing special about her. This is kind of interesting because later on in the episode, the common folk are crying for meat when the city gates are closed. Things are tough in King's Landing because of the Velaryon blockade. Supplies are running low in King's Landing, and people are forced to eat rotten food and really thin soup just to survive. So things are really not looking good here, especially for the king. During the Battle of Rook's Rest, he was severely burned and has many broken bones. In the books, he broke some of his ribs and a hip from the fall. It seems that because he was wearing Valyrian steel armor in the show, it might have actually saved his life, because Valyrian steel is spell-forged, stronger and more durable than that of regular steel. But even with that, parts of his armor were fused to his skin, and the maesters have to peel it off of him. Alicent seems very concerned, asking if her son will live, while Aemond comes in and doesn't seem too concerned about Aegon's survival. He doesn't even make an effort to look sad about it at all. He just says that someone has to rule while the king is incapacitated and on the brink of death. Alicent later asks Criston Cole what actually happened at Rook's Rest, and he doesn't seem too eager to talk to her about it. He says that Aegon fought valiantly, and when asked what Aemond's part in it was, he says that he can't be certain. Things are kind of ambiguous when it comes to Aemond's intentions during Rook's Rest. When Aegon showed up, he waited until he got into a confrontation with Rhaenys before he acted, even though Criston kept signaling for him. And then when he showed up, he attacked regardless of his brother's safety. It seems intentional, but people like Criston have never truly experienced dragon warfare. This could easily be played off as Aemond showing up late and trying to attack Meleys and save his brother, but he just happened to get caught in the crossfire. Then that whole incident in the woods when Aemond pulled out his sword. Maybe he was going to make sure Aegon was truly dead, or maybe he was just putting it away. But if that's the case, the question becomes, why did he have it out in the first place straight off the back of Vhagar? So maybe Criston is telling the truth that he really doesn't know what to think about Rook's Rest and Aemond, or maybe he's just in denial. Deep down he knows but refuses to believe that Aemond, a boy he helped raise, would willingly try to kill his own brother. On Dragonstone, the Blacks deal with the fallout of Rhaenys and Meleys's deaths. Rhaenys was their most experienced dragon rider, and Meleys their largest dragon immediately available to them. With them gone, and no standing army, they're at a huge disadvantage. The only person that they can really rely on at this point is Daemon, trying to get an army in the Riverlands, but he's not been communicating with them. During the meeting, Alfred, Broom, and Rhaenyra have been out of sorts. Alfred has been the main person questioning Rhaenyra's choices. Despite swearing fealty to her, he doesn't seem too willing to follow her. He says that as a woman, Rhaenyra inherently knows nothing about fighting a war. But Rhaenyra says that gender is irrelevant. They grew up in a time of peace. Even if Alfred is a man, he never actually fought in a war, so his experience isn't that far above her own. The council talks about how to proceed. Steffan Darkland, the Lord Commander of Rhaenyra's Queensguard, wants to fight and get revenge for Rook's Rest in Duskendale. Duskendale was his home, and Criston Cole killed his father, so he's still very angry. Others say that Aegon might be dead after the battle, but it may not mean anything since anyone else could just take his place. They also say that after Rook's Rest, Vhagar is exhausted, so they need to get rid of her. Vhagar is the most powerful dragon alive, and the biggest asset to the Greens, so wiping her off the board would be pivotal. Rhaenyra offers to do something about her, since Syrax is the only dragon that they have at their immediate disposal who could have some kind of chance despite the size disparity, but they shut that down. What if Rhaenyra ends up like Aegon, or worse? It would be a devastating blow. So she asks them what can she do, and they have no answer. Baela grieves the death of her grandmother, and Jacaerys shows up. Like his mom Rhaenyra, Jace is tired of sitting around and doing nothing. He wants to go to the Riverlands and visit the Frey so he can secure a crossing for Cregan Stark's Greybeard army, which they need desperately with no army of their own. Since the beginning of the season, he's been wanting to act. This has always been the case with Jacaerys' character since season 1. Even as a child, he's always been quick to action like his father Harwin, sometimes to his own detriment. But now, like his stepdad Daemon, Jacaerys is willing to go around his mother and queen to do what he believes has to be done. So Daemon is having an influence on Jacaerys, but how big it is, we'll have to see. In the Riverlands, Daemon seeks an alliance with the Brackens, the ancient enemies of House Blackwood. Lord Bracken taunts Willem Blackwood about the death of his brother Samwell, who died in the Battle of the Burning Mill a few episodes ago. Daemon says, "Bend the knee to me," not to his wife Rhaenyra, who he's supposedly raising an army for. It seems more and more like he's out for himself now instead of his wife. Yet, even under the threat of Dragonfire, the Brackens refuse to bend the knee to him. Daemon could have burned them all here, but he refuses to. He likes their attitude and thinks he needs men like them. So he pulls Willem to the side and says instead of fighting them, they should find a way to persuade them. Willem says that every man has a weakness, and Daemon says that there are things the crown must not be seen to do. Kind of like that hit he put on Aemond that led to the death of Prince Jaehaerys. He tells Willem to give them his worst. So even though it's not said explicitly, it seems that Daemon has probably ordered the Blackwoods to commit war crimes against the Brackens in order to force their loyalty. Is there no low Daemon is not willing to go for the sake of power and control? We get our first look at Lady Jane of the Vale. Lady Jane is the current ruler of House Arryn during the dance. Years ago, Lady Jane actually banished Daemon from the Vale after his first wife, Lady Rhea Royce, died, and he tried to take Runestone for himself. Lady Jane is upset. She wanted a dragon to protect the Vale. She got 2 of them, but they're hatchlings and borderline useless in a real fight. She feels like she got played, but Rhaena still tries to get her to honor her agreement since technically, Rhaenyra did fulfill her end of the agreement, and no specifications were made on Lady Jane's end. Jane says that Rhaena should not goad her when her safety depends on her hospitality. Rhaena has no real power in the Vale, and Lady Jane also hates feeling powerless as well. Despite the Eyrie being nigh impregnable, they are still vulnerable to dragons. Years ago, Queen Visenya landed in the Eyrie with Vhagar, and the sheer threat of her dragon was enough to get the Arryns to bend the knee. So, Lady Jane has every reason to feel slighted by Rhaenyra using a technicality to get what she wants, while the Vale is still left in as much danger as it was before. Rhaenyra talks with Mysaria on Dragonstone, lamenting her position in the war. Rhaenyra says that she is a sovereign and cannot do as she pleases. The contradiction is obvious. A sovereign is a person with supposedly all the power to do what they want, but duty keeps them chained. Rhaenyra's plight is similar to her brother Aegon, how he is king, yet the people around him force him to do nothing, and he lacks respect. Rhaenyra says that despite being chosen by her father to lead, he never actually prepared her to fight. Instead of swords and shields, she had to carry cups and wine, learn the names of lords and castles. She says that because she wasn't born a son and taught to fight like a warrior, the people look down on her. So she's really stressed. She doesn't know what path to take because hers has never been trod before. She says all of this as she walks towards a dragon skull, which I do believe is the skull of Meraxes. Meraxes was the dragon of Princess Rhaenys, the first one of Aegon the Conqueror's sister wives, who was shot down and killed in Dorne. As a peace offering, the Princess of Dorne at the time gave it back to Aegon. Maybe this is where it wound up. Both Rhaenys, the wife of Aegon, and Rhaenys, the queen who never was, were unafraid to fight, so maybe she's looking to them for inspiration. But Mysaria says that there is more than one way to fight a war, beyond steel and fire. She says that Criston Cole made a mistake showing off the head of Meleys. The people are starving and see a dead dragon as a symbol of war and death coming closer to their home. Mysaria says that the thousands of people in King's Landing have been living in the shadow of the Red Keep, forgotten, and rumors to the discontent are feed. She says to let others do what she cannot. And Rhaenyra's servant Alinda is sent away to King's Landing, perhaps to sow discord among the frightened people. Rhaenyra talks to Baela, who is still grieving the death of her grandmother. They talk about the time when Rhaenys claimed Meleys, and this is a pretty important conversation in my opinion. Baela says that Rhaenys snuck into the dragon pit to claim her, and that Daemon was furious. Meleys was the dragon of his dead mother, yet Baela says she would have none of him but bent her neck to Rhaenys. This is important because it shows that there is probably more to claiming a dragon than just being a Targaryen. There are no real records of trueborn Targaryens failing to claim dragons, but if Daemon, a man of arguably pure Valyrian descent, failed when Rhaenys, who is half Baratheon, succeeded, it shows that blood may not be the most important factor. The story of Rhaenys and Meleys honestly reminds me of Aemond and Vhagar. They're very similar. Like Rhaenys, Aemond snuck away to claim Vhagar, and when he did, Baela and Rhaena were pissed. Vhagar belonged to their mom, but dragons don't go to people based on who their parents were, like lands or titles. They're living, breathing, and sentient. Rhaena had been planning to claim Vhagar until Aemond got to her first. But with the added context of how Rhaenys claimed her dragon, even if Aemond didn't sneak out that night to claim Vhagar, there is no guarantee that she would have chosen to let Rhaena ride her, even if her mother was her last rider. As already said, Meleys was Daemon's mother's dragon, and she refused him. So perhaps things would have ended up the same way even if Aemond never claimed her first. This whole story also explains why Rhaena went dragonless for so long. Rhaenyra says during the end of the episode that Rhaena's last attempt at claiming a dragon nearly killed her. Which dragon she tried to claim, we don't know, but it shows that blood may not be the end-all be-all, which is pretty relevant at the end of the episode, but we'll get to that. Rhaenyra tells Baela to meet with her grandfather Corlys and gives her a box. We'll later come to know that within this box is a pin often worn by the hand of the king, though this time it will be for the hand of the queen since this is for Rhaenyra's court. With the death of his wife, will the sea snake accept? Back in Harrenhal, Daemon dreams of a white-haired woman. She tells him that he was made to wear a crown, that Viserys was weak. She says if only he was born first, her favorite son. In Season 1, Viserys says this.
No. I will not revisit this debate. You were always Mother's favorite.
With these clues in mind, this mystery woman that Daemon is sleeping with is most likely his mother, Alyssa Targaryen. Daemon probably didn't recognize her because she died when he was very young due to complications in childbirth. Viserys and Daemon actually had a little brother named Aegon, but his birth took such a toll on Alyssa that she never recovered from it. She died within a year, and her last son, Aegon, followed her 6 months after. Alice River says later on that it's a shame that he never really knew his mom, hinting that she might have been behind his dreams and visions. But I find this interesting because in the books, Alyssa doesn't look like a typical Targaryen like she does in the show. In the books, she had dirty blonde hair instead of white. Her eyes were two different colors, one of them purple and the other one green. In the books, Tyrion Lannister also has heterochromia. One of his eyes is black and the other is green. Perhaps this is a hint to another theory. Alyssa also had a broken nose that healed crooked when she was a kid, so Alyssa Targaryen in the books did not fit the typical bill of a Targaryen. Now, this could just be a casting choice and the showrunners choosing to just play into the Targaryen features. They did this with Rhaenys. She has white hair in the show, but in the books her hair is black. But what if the reason Daemon sees his mom as a typical Targaryen is because of what Alice says later on? He never actually knew her. She died when he was around 3, so maybe this is just his mind filling in the blanks. It's an interesting thought. Daemon is awoken from his dream by Simon Strong. This whole time, Daemon was hallucinating at dinner. Simon asks him if the duck is not to his liking, and that there is goose if he prefers it. Rhaenyra made a similar comparison to Laenor when they were engaged in Season 1, but that was for his romantic preferences, not dinner.
I prefer roast duck to goose. I cannot say why.
Once he snaps out of his fog, Daemon says he wants to prepare Harrenhal to house a host of soldiers. Simon says that would be nice, but since Laird took all the money, they can't afford repairs, and we're hoping Rhaenyra could perhaps lend them the coin to do so. Daemon says no, and that he will see to the payment, and before he leaves, he tells Simon Strong to call him my king, instead of your grace, like he demanded him to do earlier when he first arrived at Harrenhal. But Simon calls him King Consort instead. Calling Daemon king would be akin to putting him on equal grounds with Rhaenyra, or over her entirely, since kings have historically ruled over queens. So we ask the consort at the end to show that Daemon is not the reigning monarch, but attached to her. Something that Daemon does not like, saying it's unnecessary. In King's Landing, a vote is held to determine who should stand in a regency for Aegon. Alicent puts herself forward because she's done this before. When Viserys was ill and dying, she sat the Iron Throne and ruled. But like Rhaenyra's council on Dragonstone, they don't have faith in Alicent because she is a woman, and though she ruled in a time of peace, this is war. Maester Orwyle is the only one to speak in Alicent's defense, and when she turns to Larys and Criston Cole, arguably the men who support her the most, they turn on her. Larys makes a point that is somewhat valid. The Greens have been fighting for the idea that a son comes before a daughter. How would their position look if they raised up a woman against another woman over the sons they were advocating for? Ultimately, the decision falls to Criston Cole, as he is Hand of the King, and he chooses Aemond to rule, who doesn't need to be told twice. We see that Aemond is a bit of a step up from Aegon. He's clear, concise, knows what he wants to do, and people actually respect what he has to say. He even has the Ratcatchers cut down. But there are still some flaws in his orders. When told that the people are fleeing the city in fear of war, Aemond has the gates closed. This will most likely cause problems with the common folk. They're scared, starving, suffering, and now being trapped like rats with the looming threat of war. Sylvie, the woman who slept with Aemond episodes ago, said that when princes lose their temper, the common folk suffer. Aemond burned Aegon, and with him now in control and locking down the city, it seems that the people are set to suffer even more. Alicent seems to dissociate with the meeting after all of this takes place. She realizes that she has no real power or influence here like she did before. Viserys is dead, Otto is gone, Aegon, who might have listened to her, is critically injured, and her two biggest supporters have turned on her. Things do not look good. We see Hugh Hammer, the guy Aegon commissioned to produce scorpion bolts, weapons capable of harming and killing dragons. His family is suffering. They have little food, they have no money, and his daughter is sick. Hugh's wife wants to leave, but Hugh says he doesn't want to be a beggar, and clings to Aegon's promise of payment. But with Aegon critically injured, his survival questionable, and his brother now in charge, will Aemond keep his brother's word? Kat says that with Aegon's empty promises, Hugh can feed the mouths of ghosts. Alicent confronts Criston Cole and questions his loyalty to her after he made Aemond regent. Criston Cole tells Alicent about Rook's Rest in return, and what it was like to see dragons at war. Criston is a soldier who's used to blood and steel, not fire and ash. It's clear that the battle has left him shaken. He says the war was given to the dragons, so a dragon rider should lead them. He says he spared Alicent. She knows nothing of war, especially one utilizing dragons. Would she really be capable of leading the cause? Alicent said she did not wish to be spared, and that she did not give him leave to speak her name. So a line is being drawn between the two of them. The common folk, along with Hugh and his family, try to leave King's Landing, only to have the gates shut and barred. The Gold Cloaks say it was the order of Aemond, the Prince Regent, so word is getting out that Aegon may no longer be in charge. Hugh's daughter also seems very pale during this. If she dies, I wonder how this will affect the blacksmith. Jacaerys meets the Freys of the Crossing, Lord Forrest and Lady Sabitha. The Freys are on the fence about who to support. Lord Grover hasn't declared for anyone. In the books, Lord Grover Tully actually declared for Aegon and the Greens, but his son, Elmo Tully, who is dead in the show, never sent any word of support for either side out. Since both sides have dragons, he didn't want Riverrun to get caught in the crossfire, so he stayed neutral. But there is another reason for fear when it comes to the Freys. Vhagar. Having the possibility of facing the biggest dragon alive can be rather intimidating for people who don't have dragons of their own. Jacaerys promises his protection, along with that of his uncle Daemon, who has no knowledge of this, of course, but the Freys, ever the opportunist, want more. They want Harrenhal, the largest castle in the Riverlands, and the seat of Larys Strong. Jacaerys says that if they want that, their knees must bend to his mother Rhaenyra. We don't hear them answer, but it seems that Jace was successful in this meeting. Daemon chops wood as he prepares Harrenhal. As he does this, he hears screams, and then sees Alys Rivers. Alys tends to Daemon's hand, which is bloody from all the work, but perhaps there is a double meaning to this. Daemon has often had bloody hands in a number of his visions. This new injury seems to be a new manifestation of those visions now. Alys says that she hears strange things from Brackenland. Children stolen from their mothers, wives carried away. She says she hears cries of anguish on the wind. Somehow, she knows these horrific events without having to be told of them. Daemon calls it war, but she calls it crimes against the innocent. She questions Daemon. He had the Blackwoods do this to force the Brackens to submit, but if an army only serves out of fear, is that one worth having? Since season 1, Daemon has always believed in using fear and intimidation to get what he wanted. He says that when the Brackens serve him, he'll treat them fairly. But Alys says that it's always the weak and the women who suffer for the sake of power. Perhaps she has experienced something similar before. Daemon says Aegon is unlikely to survive, and with Aemond in charge, the people will suffer. He's not wrong, given how he shut the gates, but would the people really fare any better under him? A man willing to sanction war crimes to get what he wants. He and Aemond aren't so different despite what he says, and it's during this conversation that we hear Daemon's true intentions. He wants to take King's Landing or die. He doesn't believe Rhaenyra can win the war even if he willed it to be so, and that the people look to a man for strength. He asks who's better suited to rule, the Hightowers or Viserys' first true heir. He says he will take King's Landing and that Rhaenyra is welcome to take her place at his side, and they can rule together as king and queen, not a king consort. Daemon never liked being second place. He wants to be acknowledged. He wants to be recognized. He wants to rule. Simon then shows up and says that the Brackens have bent the knee. Baela talks with Corlys, who is still going through it with the death of Rhaenys. They talk about her, and Baela tells Corlys that Rhaenyra wants him to be Hand of the King, but the Sea Snake is still sore over what he lost. Baela tells him that Rhaenys was more than his wife, but a dragon rider who knew what she was doing and went out on her own terms, like her mother Laena did years ago. Baela says that's how she would want to go as well, a dragon rider's death. And with the way things look, such a statement isn't the best sign. Baela says that she grieves Rhaenys, but that she carries her with her as well. She wants to see Rhaenyra ascend the Iron Throne that her grandmother was robbed of. That's what Rhaenys would want. In response, Corlys says that he wants to name Baela heir to Driftmark. Earlier in this season, Corlys and Rhaenys were trying to figure out who his heir would be, if Rhaenyra's son Joffrey should be heir, or Baela's sister Rhaena. Baela being heir to Driftmark was something that Rhaenys wanted after Laena died in season 1, but Corlys refused because he wanted Lucerys to be his heir, and have his name remembered. But this time, it's Baela who refuses. She may be his granddaughter, but Baela is a Targaryen by name and nature. She says Driftmark must pass to someone of salt and sea. And with the revelation of Adam and Alan being the bastard sons of Corlys last episode, there may be some options. Rhaenyra meets with Alfred Broom. She tries to find some common ground with him and gives him a mission to go and see Daemon at Harrenhal, since he won't respond to any of her ravens. She wants him to ascertain Daemon's intentions, if he's still loyal to her or is out for himself. Back at Harrenhal, Daemon is awoken by Simon Strong, who says that the Riverlords demand to see him. The Riverlords are angry with Daemon because he allowed the Brackens to commit war crimes. They targeted women and children, stole livestock, burned septs and farms, and killed innocent people. During all of this, Daemon has an illusion of Laena Velaryon, who asks if he's been taking care of their girls. Daemon has not been the best father, and still isn't. He hasn't even spoken to Rhaena or Baela during his time here. The Riverlords say that the Blackwoods used the war as an excuse to visit atrocities on their old rivals. There was no honor, no common decency. They blame Daemon because they flew his Targaryen banner. They call him a child murderer, which Daemon denies and says he wants the man who said it.
Oh, your man is half the kingdom, my prince.
Though House Bracken might have sworn loyalty to Daemon, the other lords say that they will never raise their banners for a tyrant like him. So Daemon's plan to use fear to force loyalty backfires and earns him the ire of the people he wants to rule instead. Alinda then makes her way to King's Landing and meets a gold cloak. She draws Miss Arya's name to bribe her way into the city since the gates are closed. She says Miss Arya wants to collect her due and that she needs to see an old friend. We find out that this old friend is Diana, the serving girl who was assaulted by Aegon in Season 1, that is now working in a tavern. Now, why does she need to see her? What part does she play in the plan? She doesn't even exist in the books. It seems that Miss Arya's plan is to fan the flames of discontent among the people. Maybe she wants to use Aegon's victim as a way to do that. In Season 1, after she was assaulted, Diana was given moon tea to prevent pregnancy. But what if it didn't work? Sometimes if not brewed properly, moon tea can have adverse effects on people. This happens with Lysa Arryn at one point. But if it didn't work altogether, could she have one of Aegon's bastards tucked away? Will they be used as evidence to sow discord with the royal family? We see a shot of Aemond staring at the Iron Throne. Aemond has always thought that he was more suited to be a king than his brother, and now with Aegon injured, his survival unlikely, he is in power now. Helena then appears and asks him if it was worth the price. In Season 1, Helena once said that in order for Aemond to claim a dragon, he would have to close an eye. Then his grandfather Otto said that claiming Vhagar was worth 1,000 times the price he paid, as she is the most powerful dragon in the world. Now once again, to become more powerful, Aemond pays another price, his own brother. How far is he willing to go? Alicent sits with Aegon, who is rough to say the least. Aegon resembles his father Viserys in his later years of life, disfigured and on the brink of death, with Alicent by his side. She looks worried, perhaps even feels guilty for pushing him away. Maybe if she had embraced him last episode instead of pushed him away, he wouldn't have flown off on Sunfire to prove himself. And this wouldn't have happened. As she leaves the room, Aegon speaks, but it's too faint for her to hear. He says, "Mummy." Even after everything she's put him through, the physical and verbal abuse, the disregard of his own personal feelings, all Aegon wanted was her love and approval. Despite being a king and a failure, he still craves his mother's acceptance. On Dragonstone, Jacaerys finally returns and meets Rhaenyra. She's reading a book about Visenya. Visenya Targaryen was the older sister of Aegon the Conqueror, and one of his sister wives. She was the first rider of Vhagar and the wielder of Dark Sister. Dark Sister is Daemon's sword. It's Valyrian steel. Visenya is also the name of Rhaenyra's daughter, who died last season after a complicated birth. She appears to admire Visenya and seeks to embody certain aspects of her. She was a warrior queen, feared and respected, while Rhaenyra is questioned at almost every turn. Jacaerys, though, says he hopes his mother won't take her as an example. Powerful as she was, Visenya was not the best woman. She helped her son Maegor, also known as Maegor the Cruel, steal the throne from his nephew Aegon the Uncrowned. She helped him solidify his reign of terror. So Jacaerys might have a point here. Rhaenyra talks to him about his meeting with the Freys, and while she's proud of him for securing a deal, she's frustrated. She's a queen, and yet she isn't allowed to fight for her own inheritance. She fights for her own council to even respect her, and now her own son goes behind her back. Jacaerys voices his own frustration about being idle. He's a Targaryen too. He wants to act, especially since Rhaenys is dead. But Rhaenyra says he's too young, and Vhagar is a looming threat. They recognize Aemond as a threat and that they have no answer for him and his dragon. Since Rhaenyra's dragon is the only one that they have that's immediately available to them and of a decent size, she's also the only one that stands some kind of chance. But Rhaenyra has no combat experience, nor does her dragon Syrax, who is really just a glorified flying horse, to be honest. She says that Syrax is faster than Vhagar, but Meleys was bigger and faster than Syrax. Vhagar still killed her. So they need more options, more dragons. Jacaerys brings up two that could take on Vhagar, Vermithor and Silverwing. Vermithor and Silverwing were the dragons of Old King Jaehaerys and Good Queen Alysanne. We saw Daemon sing to Vermithor last season. Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, is the second largest dragon in the world. So he's almost the size of Vhagar, but younger, probably faster too, so he could have a chance against her in combat. But he needs a rider. Jacaerys recommends Rhaena, but Rhaenyra says that her last attempt to claim a dragon almost ended in her dying, so they need someone else. Jacaerys then comes up with the idea that maybe the riders don't have to be pure Targaryens. I mean, he isn't, he's a bastard, his father is Harwin Strong. Blood purity is the main reason Targaryens practice incest, so they can claim dragons, but as mentioned multiple times in this episode, blood may not be everything. Daemon was refused by a dragon, and even his daughter Rhaena was refused as well. So Jacaerys has the idea of extending the branch to other families. Other Targaryens who broke off of the family tree years ago, whose blood may be thinner, but still they're all the same. Some candidates could be House Baratheon. Orys Baratheon, the founder of the house, was said to be Aegon the Conqueror's bastard half-brother. So there could be some dragon blood within the stag that allows him the ability to ride dragons. But they support Aegon and the Greens, so they're unlikely to be sought out for help. There's also that guy, Ulf White, from a couple episodes ago, who claims to be the bastard son of Balon the Brave, who was the father of Viserys and Daemon. If his claims are true, perhaps he could claim a dragon of his own as well. But the real issue becomes, what happens when the Greens find out? Perhaps they'll want some seeds of their own. But I think that does it for this video. This was a pretty good episode with some setup for the future, and I am definitely looking forward to more. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me what you thought down below, and I will see you all next time.